My reference a moment ago to the fact that a pilot's peculiarly official position placed him out of the reach of criticism or command brings Stephen W. naturally to mind. He was a gifted pilot, a good fellow, a tireless talker, and both wit and humor in him, and he had a most irreverent independence, too, and was deliciously easygoing and comfortable in the presence of age, official dignity, and even the most august wealth. He always had work. He never saved a penny. He was a most persuasive borrower. He was in debt to every pilot on the river and to the majority of the captains. He could throw a sort of splendor around a bit of harum-scarum, devil-may-care piloting that made it almost fascinating, but not to everybody. He made a trip with good old Captain Y once and was relieved from duty when the boat got to New Orleans. Somebody expressed surprise at the discharge. Captain Y shuddered at the mere mention of Stephen. Then his poor, thin old voice piped out something like this: "Why, bless me, I wouldn't have such a wild creature on my boat for the world, not for the whole world. He swears, he sings, he whistles, he yells. I never saw such an Injun to yell. All times of the night, it never made any difference to him. He would just yell that way, not for anything in particular, not merely on account of a kind of devilish comfort he got out of it. I never could get into sound sleep, but he would fetch me out of bed all in a cold sweat with one of those dreadful war whoops. A queer being, a very queer being. No respect for anything or anybody. Sometimes he called me Johnny, and he kept a fiddle and a cat, and he played execrably. This seemed to distress the cat, and so the cat would howl. Nobody could sleep where that man and his family was. And reckless? There was never anything like it. Now, you may believe it or not, but as sure as I'm sitting here, he brought my boat a-tilting down through those awful snags at Chilcoot under a rattling head of steam, and went a-blowing like the very nation at that. My officers will tell you so. They saw it. And, sir, while he was a-tearing right down through those snags, and I a-shaking in my shoes and praying I wish I may never speak again, if he didn't pucker up his mouth and go whistling. Yes, sir, whistling, "Buffalo gals, can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight? Can't you come out tonight?" And doing it as calmly as if he were attending a funeral and weren't related to the corpse. And when I remonstrated with him about it, he smiled down on me as if I was his child, and told me to run in the house and try to be good and not be meddling with my superiors. Once a pretty mean captain caught Stephen in New Orleans out of work and, as usual, out of money. He laid steady siege to Stephen, who was in very close place, and finally persuaded him to hire with him at $125 per month, just half wages, the captain agreeing not to divulge the secret and so bring down the contempt of all the guild upon the poor fellow. But the boat was not more than a day out of New Orleans before Stephen discovered that the captain was boasting of his exploit, and that all the officers had been told. Stephen winced but said nothing. About the middle of the afternoon, the captain stepped out on the hurricane deck, cast his eyes around, and looked a good deal surprised. He glanced inquiringly aloft at Stephen, but Stephen was whistling placidly and attending his business. The captain stood around a while in evident discomfort, and once or twice seemed about to make a suggestion, but the etiquette of the river taught him to avoid that sort of rashness, so he managed to hold his peace. He chaffed and puzzled a few minutes longer, then retired to his apartments. But soon he was out again, and apparently more perplexed than ever. Presently he ventured to remark with deference, "Pretty good stage of the river now, ain't it, sir?" "Well, I should say so. Bankful is a pretty liberal stage. Seems to be a good deal of current here." "Good deal don't describe it. It's worse than a mill race." Isn't it easier toward shore than it is out here in the middle? Yes, I reckon it is. But a body can't be too careful with a steamboat. It's pretty safe out here. Can't strike any bottom here, you can depend on that. The captain departed, looking rueful enough. At this rate, he would probably die of old age before his boat got to St. Louis. Next day, he appeared on deck and again found Stephen faithfully standing up the middle of the river, fighting the whole vast force of the Mississippi, and whistling the same placid tune. This thing was becoming serious. In by the shore was a slower boat, clipping along in the easy water and gaining steadily. She began to make for an island chute. Stephen stuck out in the middle of the river. Speech was wrung from the captain. He said, "Mr. W., don't that chute cut off a good deal of distance?" "I think it does, but I don't know." "Don't know? Well, isn't there enough water in it now to go through?" "I expect there is, but I'm not certain." "Upon my word, this is odd. Why, those pilots on that boat yonder are going to try it. Do they mean to say that you don't know as much as they do?" "They? Why, they are $250 pilots. But don't you be uneasy. I know as much as any man can afford to know for $125. The captain surrendered. 5 minutes later, Stephen was bowling through the chute and showing the rival boat a $250 pair of heels.